Hello, Coldwell Banker, and welcome to the kickoff of the Mile High View. Happy New Year. I am so excited about the panel of guests I have today. We have Amanda Snitker, realtor with our Global Luxury office out of Denver. We have Greg Batchelor, the owner of Real Property Management Colorado. We have Matthew Hibbler joining us today from Guaranteed Rate Affinity. And of course, our friend Dr. Elliot Eisenberg with All Things Economy. My first guest is Amanda Snitker. Amanda, of course, is a realtor with Coldwell Banker Global Luxury Denver. Since moving to Denver metro area, she has cultivated an in-depth knowledge of the local market and a deep appreciation for the Colorado lifestyle. As a third-generation realtor, Amanda practically has real estate in her DNA, and she is dedicated to helping her clients find more than just houses. She helps them discover their dream homes. With a master's degree in engineering from the University of Colorado and the love of data, Amanda blends analytical precision with personalized service to deliver exceptional results for her clients. She is the current chair of DMAR's Market Trends Committee, so she's got her finger on the pulse of what's happening in our market. Her expertise, combined with her natural enthusiasm, makes her a trusted guide for buyers and sellers navigating the dynamic Denver real estate market, and also an amazing advisor for us. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks.
So all things Colorado real estate data 2025. What are you sharing with us today?
Yeah. Not a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just to start, we'll look at the year to date.
Okay.
We have 2025 there on the right. And this is our Denver metro area. So I know we have like all of Colorado people here. So we'll talk about it a little bit, both statewide and just the metro area. But the metro area accounts for about 50% of all our sales. So it is meaningful, even if it's just, you know, you're not on the Front Range. But the last 3 years have been essentially flat in all categories, aside from days on market. But our new listings are up a little bit over the last 2 years, which is great. It's not a ton. We have more inventory on the market, but that's just from properties sitting longer versus, you know, selling in a week.
Sure.
So, but when we look at the closed and year over year, you know, we've had 42,000 sales for the last 3 years, and the median sale price is up only 0.5% year over year. Total sales, when we look back to 2021, are down 30%, but for the last 3 years have been essentially flat.
Are we still really looking at 21, 20? 21?
I mean, it's still on the graph, so it's relevant.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I think, you know, we've been talking about what an anomaly those years were anyway. And if you look back to 2019, we're still below where we were in 2019 as far as sales volume. We had about 58,000 sales in 2019, and we had 42,000 this year.
So the one thing that stands out for you?
I think probably price, because I'm going to talk about that some more, of that the pricing has been flat for the last 3 years. And that doesn't make sellers happy, and oddly hasn't made buyers happy.
Okay.
So
no one's
so
happy.
no one's happy.
Okay.
There's just variables at play that are impactful that don't have anything to do with price.
Okay.
And so we'll kind of look at that as far as affordability.
Okay.
But this has been a little bit of a gift to buyers. Is this just flattening out of the pricing? We just had to recalibrate after the run up that we had during the pandemic years.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about affordability.
Yeah. So, let me just look at statewide.
Okay.
So this is just state for November, and I just put this in here. CAR doesn't have their annual totals yet, but I just wanted to show that even though that was the metro area, statewide, we were very similar year over year as far as number of sales and pricing. And months of inventory for November was exactly the same as it was in 2024, statewide.
Okay. So somebody who loves numbers, this isn't all that exciting.
It's no. And I get really excited about things no one else gets excited about. It's very boring.
Okay.
But I think the factor for buyers is just the essence of affordability that's impacted for them financially over a number of factors. Like we're looking at maybe just price or interest rate, but they have all sorts of things that are impacting their lifestyles that have increased drastically over years. So we have childcare, we have student loans coming back due, we have insurance, both household and healthcare. And so there's just a lot, they're just getting hit from all angles. And so while the pricing's been flat, it hasn't made them feel like anything is more affordable. So when we just look at statewide, so our home ownership rate is 66%. And when you look at affordability, it's showing that you need $62,000 in annual income per household to afford the median rent. And then to afford a townhome, you need $138,000 a year. And to afford a single family home, you need $186,000 a year.
So that's a pretty huge jump.
Yes.
Okay.
So it is really hard for renters who can't even afford the median rent to get to a point where they can afford to buy even a townhome, let alone a single family home.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Space to get. So, and then when we look at our state is very different. So when you look at our mountain communities that have a lot of second homes and there's a huge disparity between income, you have the service industries, and then you have the people that live there that, are retired, and they, are bringing in a large amount of just stimulus to the economy, but they're not necessarily working in that community. So, when you look at Eagle County, we have a 67% home ownership rate, $60,000 a year, but is what the median renter's income is right now, but they'd need $81,000 a year in order to afford the median rent. And then $463,000 a year to afford a townhome, and $600,000 a year in annual income to afford a single family home.
Okay. I won't be moving there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if we just look at Denver County, we've got a 49% home ownership rate, and then you need $143,000 to own a townhome and $217,000 to buy a single family home. These, interestingly, is very similar to Jefferson County.
Okay.
These affordability numbers are almost the same, but they have about a 77% home ownership rate in the county. And I think that's just a demographic difference. I think we have a lot of young professionals that move to Denver right out of college. They're choosing to rent. They are single or, a young couple, and, maybe with a roommate situation. And then when they get older and they start a family, they move to Applewood.
Sure.
So I think that's just a transition, but the numbers here look about the same.
So at the 49% home ownership rate, has that stayed the same? Has it dropped?
I'm actually not sure about that. I haven't looked back in the historical. I would say it's probably come down a bit, but I don't know.
And that could be the transition out of Denver County to other areas.
Yeah, I think people just move. They move to the city when they want to rent, and then when they buy a house, they move to another county.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So how did sellers adjust in 2025?
Well, for the most part, not great. We had a lot of really hard conversations with sellers about expectations and the current market and timing. But I would say the success of those conversations really varied based on how long they'd owned the home.
Okay.
So if we look at, the way that our pricing has moved through time, and, we have the peak of the COVID years here, and then it's kind of tapered out here, and you can see the seasonality in our sale prices. A lot of people that bought in the peak, if they were in a situation where they had to sell now, they're probably coming to the table with some money, or they've lost what they put in their down payment. So those were really hard conversations to have with people. And if, I think when people were excited about purchasing during the pandemic years and we were seeing double-digit appreciation, people wanted to believe that was going to continue.
Sure.
And we all knew it wasn't. Like, there's going to be a cycle to it. It has to correct. There's no way that was sustainable. But to think that, 3 or 4 years after they purchased, they are losing money on it it's hard for people to kind of wrap their head around that when we had seen positive appreciation for a really long time.
Sure. And those when those sellers were buyers, they saw those sellers.
Right. They wanted to be those
They wanted
sellers
to be
someday.
those sellers,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. When I'm a seller, I'm also going to make $100,000.
Right.
And so, it's time in the market and it's timing of the market. And, they all get to make those choices as to whether that is the time that they sell or not. And sometimes those, choices are pressured by other things like a job or a divorce or changes in their lifestyle. So, people are always having to make those decisions, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And it's hard for us on our end because we always want people to win, obviously.
Sure.
Like we want it to come out well for people, and we can't control it, but we can just give them the best information that we have. And, cutting your losses sometimes is the best way out and the quickest way to get you into a positive financial environment and get you moved on to the next step.
Sure. So it's almost, those conversations are almost creating that win.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. What other conversations with clients this year are you anticipating?
For this year, I think much of the same.
Okay.
I think, our data looks exactly the same as it has for 3 years. And I don't expect interest rates to change enough of a meaningful amount that it's going to impact affordability in a drastic way for people.
Okay.
I think they're just going to have to be creative on the buy side and be willing to put in some work.
Okay.
Just as far as like, you have, if you want to sit down with someone and try to explain a rate buy down and it's a long term, if it's a permanent or it's a 2-1 buy down or it's like, this is how this works, they have to put in the time to understand how that works. Sure. Because us telling them that might just confuse them even more. And so they've got to get past the point of fear and resistance to it and then get to a point where they're willing to be creative and they want to make it happen. And I think we are hitting a point of pent-up demand on the buy side. People are tired of waiting around. And I don't believe that people are not buying houses because they don't want to.
Sure.
I never have conversations with people and in the end they're like, well, buying a house is dumb. They ultimately are asking me roundabout questions because they're trying to figure out how to make it work. And they might not come out directly and ask, well, how are people buying houses today? They're not going to come out and ask that. They're going to say things like, well, interest rates are too high, or home prices in Denver are inflated. I'm going to wait for the market to crash. Like, they're going to say things like that. And what they're trying to say is, I'm looking for someone to tell me something different. But they're resistant. And so you don't, right? You're like, I'm not going to argue with someone who thinks that home prices are too high. Like, it is what it is, and you just have to figure out a way to work with it. And so getting people over that resistance.
It's almost diving into what that motivation really is.
For sure.
Is it an expanding family? Is it a different job? Like, what is that motivation?
Right.
To get through all of that, all of those negative hurdles, and commentary. Probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we look at pricing for the state, it has a similar trajectory of just, we have peaks and valleys over time. We have the peak of 2022, and then, it's tapered out a little bit. So, I'm sure in each individual market, there's variation in that, but as a whole, it's still trending in a positive direction over a rolling 10 years.
Okay. Yeah. So, we're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So this is, if we just look at this year, I think for us, I thought pricing was really hard this year because we typically have some seasonality where we have a rush in the spring and our prices, jump quite a bit, and then it tapers off into the summer and we recapture some of that pricing. And then we have a little bit of a peak in September, right after everybody goes back to school and we start our life again. And then it tapers off into the fourth quarter. And we had a little bit of that. I mean, we did have a peak in June and then we had that spike in October, which is what went under contract in September. But the magnitude of change was so small that it was really flat. And so it was hard. I felt pricing, especially in the third and fourth quarter, where I would normally, if I'm using spring comps, I would take it down a couple percentage points before, I would even list it. And then we know we're making an adjustment for the seasonality and the buyer demand. But we didn't really have that peak in the spring. Even though we did have more sales in the spring, it just didn't bump the price the way that it has in the past. And so, then how much do you adjust in the fall?
Sure.
And then we had some, Fed rate drops in the fall. So the interest rate, like how much did that matter? And then we had more inventory sitting. And so there were a lot of variables that I felt were hard to have a clear direction. There was also pricing, like it didn't matter if you dropped the price.
Sure.
No one was coming to, there just wasn't a buyer for that market. So, you're telling your sellers, we haven't had a showing in 3 weeks. Do we drop it 50,000? I don't know if that's even going to bring a buyer in.
Right.
So it was challenging for I think for us on our end to maintain, confidence level and then give that messaging to the sellers, when you're in there and you're like, I don't know.
Right. Well, so much of what we do with pricing is based on numbers. And when the numbers aren't doing anything, then we have to lean on motivation and psychology. So you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the psychology side of the data?
Yeah. I think in a lack of data, we make it up. Right?
Okay.
So I think internally, both as just a person living in this world and an agent, there's just a level of uncertainty on so many things. So you can only worry about so many things. And then you just get tapped out. You stick your head in the sand, or you're like, listen, I can't open another can of worms that I need to deal with because I'm just exhausted in so many other ways. And so when you feel like there's just even a little bit of a hurdle to get over to make something happen, you just really don't have the bandwidth to do it.
Okay.
And so I think there's so much, there's tons of certainty in the market. We know what the pricing is. We know what our inventory looks like. We know how many sales we're probably going to have this year. I mean, Lawrence Yoon yesterday, or I don't know, he said the 14%, right, for an increase in the number of sales this year for nationwide. I think that's probably not what we're going to see in our market.
Okay.
I hope we do. I don't see enough of a change in other parameters that would change that to increase our sales 14%.
Okay.
So there's a lot of variables that are the same. And for buyers, they're the variables you can't control. So you can't control mortgage rates. You can't control the amount of inventory, and you can't control the price necessarily. I mean, you might offer less, but you're going to negotiate into that market. But what you can control is your own finances, how you're structuring your loan, your own timing as far as, when you're ready to make a decision and buy. You can control what type of home you buy. You can control the location that you buy. And so getting them to the point where they understand they actually have a ton of control in this, because the other variables are stagnant.
Sure.
They're the same. So when you're not in a market where home prices are increasing 10% a month, and you're getting priced out of neighborhoods while you're looking at homes, you have time to think about it. You have time to make a really good decision. And that's a luxury that buyers, really didn't have.
Oh, correct.
Up until the last 3 years.
Yeah,
and
there was no even, let me sleep on it.
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, even prior to the pandemic, if it was a really great house, it was moving really quickly. So I just, there's an element that we can't control either. We can't control that people are overwhelmed. We can't control that the news cycle is just berating us every single minute with information. We can't, but moving people into a space of understanding what they can control, I think will help people and us too, of not focusing on what you can't, and then just making good decisions for yourself. So,
okay.
Yeah. I have one more, and this is my discussion with the buyers too, is when they want to hang their hat on price. And I'm not going to say the Denver area or Colorado in general is not expensive. It's expensive to live here. It's also a great place, which is, it's why it's expensive to live here.
Right.
But I went back to going from 1990 to 2025. The blue bars are our annual average sale price. in the Denver metro area, so our 11 county area. And you can see we had a run up in 2005, and then we had the dip in, the 2008 recession, and then it kind of ran up, and then we had the peak from the pandemic, and then it's kind of leveled out. So our long-term annual price change is a little over 6% if we go back from 1990 to 2025. So these orange bars are, if I started at 1990 and I added 6% every year, where we would be now without any of these peaks and valleys is that our average sale price is actually less than it would be had we not had the pandemic. So when we had these pandemic years, we went up 38% from March of 2020 to April of 2022. And now we've flattened out. And so when you look at 2020 to 2025, we've gone up 29%, which is about 5.8% per year. So when when buyers are saying pricing has just gone up too fast and we can't keep up, it's actually not outside the norm of where we would be anyway. So again, just helping them understand that that's not a variable we can control. And what you don't want is that price to drop 20%. Because you're also not buying a house if the prices drop 20%, because there's all sorts of other factors in the economy that are causing that, which means you're not buying a house either, because you probably don't have a job, or there's too much instability and you don't feel good about it either. So we don't want that. So this this steady growth is what we like to see, and that's just where we're going to end up at some point anyway.
Okay. No, this is a great slide. So if you had a couple of tips or tricks for agents, what would they be in this market?
On the sale side, I would definitely use this.
Okay.
On the buy side. I think, for buyers, just understanding, just getting out of their head that pricing has gone too much. It's recalibrated. We're where we would be anyway. So that's off the table.
Okay.
And then I think they're going to have their best success just being creative around financing.
Okay.
And then on the sales side, pricing is hard. And I think to some degree, just being honest with the sellers. And you can show them that data that we haven't had anything change in 3 years. So if you're wanting to assume your home is appreciated, it probably hasn't. Now, granted, when you look at particular neighborhoods, there's going to be a difference in whether we had a decline or an increase in pricing. But for the most part, the pricing has been flat. So, just helping them understand, looking at that long-term pricing model too, of if you bought it in 2000 or did you buy it in 2022, and then those are totally different conversations, but you can show them the data.
Sure.
And it's hard to argue with that.
Right. So know your data. Be creative.
Yep.
With financing and helping people figure it out is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else for us?
I don't think so.
Okay. I have, surprise question.
Oh, great.
What is your favorite sport to watch or play?
Oh. I like to watch college basketball.
Okay.
And I probably like to play tennis.
Okay. Favorite college team?
Well, I went to Iowa State.
Oh, okay.
So have to go with Cyclones. Both men and women are pretty in basketball. Football's a different story. But
okay.
College basketball.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for all of the insights.
Yes.
And we will be sharing these slides with everyone so you too can dig into the data. And remember to watch for the DMAR report that Amanda crafts and curates every month. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
All right, up next, I have Greg Batchelor. Greg is the owner of Real Property Management Colorado, one of the Front Range largest residential property management companies with just under 1,800 doors under management and almost 2 decades in the business. Greg is here to share insights on the rental market from Fountain to Fort Collins and everything in between. And Greg is one of our very best friends here at Coldwell Banker. Happy New Year, Greg, and welcome to the Mile High View.
Happy New Year, Tammy. Thanks for having me. It's
absolutely
wonderful to be here.
So I hear 2025 was quite the ride in the Front Range rental market.
It was.
Okay.
It was an amazing ride. So we watched a number of things that transpired. So obviously, from a supply and demand standpoint, we watched that all throughout the year. We had an unbelievable excess of supply hit the market in 2025. And a lot of it was when there were homes that weren't selling at the price point that sellers could pull off. They would then look to what they were hoping was going to be the silver bullet, i.e. the rental option, which didn't turn out to be as much the silver bullet. A lot of folks thought that was going to be the case. Then they would come over and they would find out, their mortgage is X and we can rent it for Y, which was something far less than X. And it was just really a function of too much supply, not enough demand. And we really saw demand remain steady, but we just had so much more excess in supply. And so that really drove rental rates down. We saw in a lot of parts of the Front Range, rental rates dropped 7 to 10%. Some areas maybe not quite as bad, but some even more than 10.
Okay, so where did we land at the end of 2025?
Yeah, most areas landed in that 7 to 10% down range.
Okay. I hear that marketplace dynamics within our buy-sell market, we talked a little bit about that, and your rental market have never been more correlated than they've been in 2025.
Yeah, so true. So one of the things that we watch all throughout the year is what is our rental inventory doing relative to where the sales inventory is at? And normally in just about any of the zip codes or the different categorical areas that we look at, there is always more homes for sale than there are for rent. During 2025, we saw some inverse. There was so much supply coming into our market, sometimes even 3 to 4 times what we would normally see all throughout the year. And it was the biggest factor was there were just homes that weren't selling at a certain price point at a certain time. And so they'd come into the rental world on our end. And when you have 3 to 4 times the amount of supply in the rental world, there's no place to go but prices to go down.
Okay. Interesting.
Very interesting. Okay. It was a fascinating year.
So the market, I like to say that the market is never good or bad. The market just is the market.
That is correct.
But there's always winners in the market.
Yes.
So who's the winner in this rental market?
Yeah, absolutely the case. So the renters won all year in 2025.
Okay.
As prices just continued to come down, renters could renegotiate better terms on an existing lease. They could move and go get a different place. So that's one. The other component is, though, as in certain areas where we started to see a little bit of short sale activity again, a little bit of foreclosure activity again, we saw some investors jump in. So you are absolutely correct. The market just is what it is. And there were folks, the renters were able to capitalize on that, and investors were as well.
Okay. So renters being winners. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time, especially here in the Front Range. Because rental rates, up until about 2 years ago, rental rates were just on a rocket ship. Every investor in Colorado was thrilled if you had a rental property coming out of the back end of the last economic recession, 2012, 2013, you just had a decade plus of rocket ship growth in your rental rates. Then all of a sudden it went the other direction.
Okay. So we saw a lot of legislative changes.
Yes.
Where are we standing with that on the rental side?
Yeah, great question. So on the back end of this last year's legislative session, there were about 20-ish bills that were housing related, not all of them that touched the rental world. But there were a couple of very, very big ones. So some of them were implemented right on the back end of the legislative session. The last couple, we had till January the 1st to be able to get all those in place because they were large and they were substantial. One of them was House Bill 1249 that was passed last year. It really changed the parameters on how security deposits are handled and walkthrough inspections that tenants are now allowed to request for. Change some of the laws around what is damage versus what is general wear and tear. And so that was a big one. A lot of different ramifications that went to that one. Then House Bill 1090 was also another very large and substantial one, which is very much focused on predatory pricing and or not being candid in terms of what your pricing structure is. And so it asked for a lot more disclosure. Obviously, in your side of the real estate world, our side of the real estate world, disclosure has been a huge thing for years and years and years. This really kicked it up to a different level. Touched on the rental industry, but it touched on a lot of other industries as well. So it was very, very all-encompassing all across the Front Range and all across Colorado.
Okay. Okay, interesting. So if there is one of those pieces, what was most impactful to your business on the legislative side?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the biggest part, from an operation standpoint, House Bill 1249 required so much internal transitions to make sure that we were meeting that. 1090 though was right there with it as well, because how we advertise and how things get disclosed and making sure that tenants understand what they're signing, and there's a lot of steps that went into that. So it required a lot more internal transformation to make sure that we're in compliance with those.
Okay. If you don't mind, I just have a public service announcement.
I love public.
Coldwell Banker agents, these are all the reasons why you want to refer
Thank you, Tammy.
real property management to any of your investors. Or if you have investment properties, please, there's so many moving parts right now to being that landlord.
Very true.
Please reach out to Greg and refer Greg to those people, because you can get into a lot here trouble really quickly.
Yes, so true. Thank you for the public service.
Yes,
announcement.
absolutely.
Glad to help any way
Well,
we can.
you know, the thing is we're here to protect each other's business.
Absolutely.
And going down a path that we're not familiar with can be dangerous.
Absolutely. the
Okay.
case.
So I think I was at a sales meeting in one of our offices, and somebody asked about all of the apartment buildings still going up. Do you got any
Yes.
insight on that?
Yeah, great question. So there are still plenty that are going up. Interestingly enough, we've seen a couple hit foreclosure, receivership. So the builders have definitely reached a place where they know they have overbuilt. So we've seen the past 2 years in a row, building permits on the multifamily side are down. Builders are finally realizing, like, we probably do need to slow this train down a little bit.
Okay.
They realize that they've overbuilt. And there are so many, the first thing we always see is that these apartment complexes will start offering, we'll call it stage one concessions, and then it's stage two concessions, and now they're offering the farm. And we're seeing a lot of that. And that's been going on much of and I think we're going to see that into 2026 as well. The other component that we're beginning to see, and it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. There is, from a construction defects legislation that has been bumped along so many times. I know the market is just screaming for some condo product, some of those kinds of things. And I know for years I've been surmising that we would see some condo conversions or some apartment conversions into condos. There is more with the rental market softening as much as it has, vacancy rates going up as much as it has. I do see that there would be the potential for some of these apartment builders to say, hey, we need to go a different direction and start deeding these out and turn them into condos. Definite possibility. We'll see what that looks like.
Okay, good to know. So I know that we've talked before about investors moving out, moving in.
Yes.
What are we doing? Investors moving out of Colorado, some moving in?
Yeah, great question. Investors are largely moving out of Colorado. So interestingly enough, let's start with population growth just a little bit. There was a stat in November, and so it encompassed most of 2025, not the full year, but the estimates were that we would, on a net population growth in Colorado, that it was going to be about 30,000. Interestingly enough, 20,000 of that is net births over net deaths. And then the remaining 10,000 is an influx of people still coming into Colorado. That has slowed down a lot, though. And so because we're beginning to see more of a shift in that slowdown, it's going to play a factor on a lot of fronts. So it's all going to start with what population is doing, and then it moves downstream from there. So there's actually a number of economists that think that we might, for the first time in 2026, see a net neutral. And for Colorado, that's pretty substantial, because I can think back a decade, we had 100 or 125,000 people net inflows. Now, investors are following that path. So a number of investors are just realizing this is a tough environment. There is an overbuilt dynamic that's going on here. And so there's a number of investors that are just saying, hey, you know what? Colorado is just not quite where I want to be right now. And so there's other states that tend to be a bit more investor friendly, and some of them are just taking their chips, off the table. So in some of those sales meetings where you and I have been at together, I've just been encouraging agents. You'll probably get the sell side, and then on the other side of a 1031 exchange, maybe not so much, because that might be a different state.
Okay. Okay, good to know. Okay, it's time to take out your crystal ball.
All right, Crystal.
All right. What's your prediction for the rental market in 2026?
Yeah, great question. I think it will continue to soften, hopefully not at the same rate that it has been. I think we'll start to see a bit of a slowing on that. Every market, it reaches an equilibrium stage and then it swings another direction. So we will get that swing back. But I still project that rental rates will still go down. Hopefully more in the 3 to 5% range than the 7 to 10% range. That will certainly help investor sentiment a whole lot. But I think there is still so much supply going into 2026 that I don't think that we'll be able to put everybody into that supply from a demand standpoint.
Okay, great. Now my favorite, surprise question.
I love surprise questions.
So what is your favorite dessert?
My favorite dessert is ice cream.
I knew you were going to say that.
I just love ice cream.
You love Glacier.
It is true. I love Glacier ice cream. Castle Rock, Colorado. I do just love either a bowl of ice cream or if I'm being really good, maybe just a little bite.
Okay, but what flavor ice cream?
I would have to, what would be my favorite? Gosh, there's a number of ones that kind of flood in there. Probably, an espresso dark chocolate.
Okay.
Kind of give me some of that coffee, a little dark chocolate in there. Also a Glacier. May not have had a scoop or two of that over the summer months.
Okay.
Love that little espresso chocolate.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, good to know.
Good to know.
All right. Thank you so much, Greg,
Thanks,
for
Tammy.
joining the Mile High View. It's always fun to have you. And thanks again for all of your support at Coldwell Banker. We appreciate you more than you know.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year
and
to you as
here's
well.
to a great 2026.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tammy.
Okay, up next, we have Matthew Hibbler with GRA. Matthew has 25 years in the mortgage business and is an industry leader in production annually. Matthew's expertise and commitment to excellence has earned him national recognition by the Scotsman's Guide, a national mortgage media outlet that tracks top producers in America. Congratulations, Matthew.
Thank you.
Matthew leads the Hibbler lending team here in Colorado and represents GRA Affinity. Welcome to the Mile High View, Matthew.
Thank you, Tammy. It's an honor to be here.
And welcome back
Thank you.
to Coldwell Banker. Yes, super excited to have you back. So we're approaching 4 years since we saw mortgage rates double from a 3% to a 6%. Then a period of time we were at 7%, and that was the new normal. We entered 2026 with an average 30-year fixed mortgage rate of 6%, roughly the lowest level in 3 years. What's a projection for rates in 2026? And wow, if you have the answer to this question.
Well, there's a little more reassurance to the mortgage marketplace than there has been in 3.5 years. And that's really why this is so relevant right now. The quick answer is we have stability going into 2026.
Okay.
More stability than we've had the last few years. I think the reason that the real estate market has felt like a stop and start, a good portion of that has to do with the mortgage rate volatility that was out in the marketplace. And the reason we had volatility is that we were coming off, amazingly low interest rates for such a long period of time. And the Fed started to back out of support. And so volatility ensued as private investments started to show up. Well, the Fed has had 3 years of running off their balance sheet. That's what Jerome Powell said at the last Fed meeting in December, was that, hey, we're going to stop this. Now that we've run off enough of our debt, we can let the market kind of cool off and see where we stand. Well, really what that's done in the Treasury market is provided more stability. Stability is a good thing. Some people would say, oh, that's boring. We would love to see rates continue to trickle downward. That would help the housing market. And I would argue to say right now, going into 2026, that the stability will actually help the mortgage market because we don't have that 0.5% increase, then 0.25% improvement. And that unknown just made a lot of buyers, in my opinion, more skeptical. Should we be buying now or should we wait? So stability is what we have in 2026. I honestly think we're going to stay in this tight range. At least a lot of the experts agree with me that we'll stay in this tight range, 6 to 6.25 for most of the year. And there's a chance, but as we approach the end of the year, that we could see rates finally crest below 6%. I think that creates a lot of activity.
Okay. All right. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Okay. The MBA, NAR, and other professional organizations have forecasted a modest increase in mortgage applications for 2026. You want to expand on that a little?
Happy to. Yeah, this stability really is
Okay.
the baseline for that. And we have seen an increase in mortgage applications already. If I look at the last quarter of 2025, October, November, December, mortgage application activity was up, depending on the month, somewhere between 6 and 9%, which is a sizable increase. A lot of that is attributed to refinance inquiry. People bought homes at 8% or 7.5%. Other home buyers bought homes with temporary rate buydowns, and they want to get out of that temporary fix, into permanent mortgage rates. And so with mortgage activity up, more home buyers refinancing to kind of solidify their budgets going forward, that's given some reassurance. And those that have felt locked into a 3 to 4% rate, as we kind of narrow the gap, 8% was too much, 7% was too much, maybe 6% is palatable, that's motivated a lot of the people that have been hopeful to make a housing change start to think about the change.
Okay. So of the applications that are coming in, if you take out the refis, are these first-time home buyers, move-up buyers?
Yeah, so the statistics show, matter of fact, I have an article right behind us here that say the percentage of applicants that are first-time buyers is smaller than what it should be or what's normal.
Okay.
I think about 20% are first-time buyers, and we certainly need more than that. Arguably, that's where the market starts. The first-time buyer enters, then those behind that can move up. They sell, they move up, buy something bigger. So there need to be more first-time buyers, that are motivated to look into mortgage and their budget and what can they afford. Housing prices and the increases to property taxes and insurance, are kind of headwinds. But at least the mortgage piece is starting to alleviate stress, and therefore activity is up. All that to say, to answer your question, 20% is first-time home buyers.
Okay.
The rest are move-up buyers, and I think that's good news. When you think about move-up buyers, a lot of those people that are now surfacing probably have a 3% mortgage rate. So are the golden handcuffs of the 3%, low budget, low mortgage payment, is that starting to subside? Maybe.
I feel like you're talking to me right now or about me right
Maybe
now. I am one of those three. I'm one of those 3%ers.
I see.
Yeah, but you're right. The gap is narrowing for sure. So there's been talk about generational wealth. Are you seeing larger down payments? Have you seen that in on the mortgage side?
Yeah, this is interesting. I don't have a statistic to reference, but here locally, what I can say is over 25 years, there are more applicants, especially first-time homebuyer applicants, that have gifted money coming in from family so that they can afford a home.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that is an increase. Yeah.
Okay, so any tips, tricks, if an agent is working with somebody that is getting gifted funds?
Not necessarily. I think
Okay.
there was a period of time where it created a little bit of heartburn as a mortgage is being processed. Where is this money coming from? And, even mom and dad gifting the money would say, why do you need my bank statement? I don't want to do that. This is my son's loan, et cetera. I think that's become streamlined.
Okay.
Gifted funds are more common. Underwriting guidelines have shifted, and it's less of a headache.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. Okay. Let's see. So affordability is on top of everyone's mind. It seems that clients are feeling the heat from increased housing prices. Talked a little bit about that. Property taxes and insurance. What are the key pieces of advice you would give to the CB community related to client concerns or objections related to affordability?
Yeah, affordability has, I think, been the sticky part of the market. And here in Colorado, we've seen home insurance almost double, sometimes triple, depending on where your house is. So home insurance is up, property taxes are up. Interest rates seem elevated from where they've been 5 years ago. And now, the price of housing clearly is higher than it's been. So it requires a new strategy. I explained to a lot of my peers, a lot of my real estate partners that, over 25 years, I think I've reinvented my approach to speaking to my customers a dozen times. And so this market requires that too. Certainly it required that in 2022 when rates went from 3% to 7%. But, the agenda is more time spent on budgets, more time spent being a financial advisor, not just the mortgage lender. And so that higher level of service then makes somebody who's hopeful and has this idea on where they want to land with a new home become a reality, and they can make this change. The average length of my consultation appointment with a brand new client to me used to be something like a half of an hour. In 30 minutes, we could cover what their hopes and dreams were, housing goals, how that fit into the mortgage, the monthly payment. Now it requires more. We're redoing their whole global household budget.
Okay.
For example, I think that's the best way to explain it. Somebody will say to me, hey, I've worked really hard. I have $200,000 to put down in my home. I'd like my monthly payment to be X, and help. What do I do next? In the past, when rates were 3%, it was really easy to take that mortgage at a 3% rate and slip it into the monthly budget for the family.
Sure.
It was easy to do. Now, inflation's been unkind the last 3 years. So I pull a credit report and I look at somebody's profile and I think, okay, you have higher credit card debt. Maybe instead of 0 car loans, you have 1 or 2. The student loans show up, so on and so forth. Well, a plan related to that $200,000 example I gave you, where we carve off some of that cash and we pay everything off, and the mortgage payment becomes the whole monthly budget.
Okay.
You don't slide a 6% mortgage payment at these housing prices into the monthly budget. It becomes the monthly budget. And that's key. So this strategy that I talk about, and there's lots of visuals that come with that. The amount of subscriptions I pay for to have software to put this visually in front of somebody. Hey, here's your new financial plan. Then we can talk mortgage. It's expensive, but it's paying off.
Okay. Great intel. So I know a little bit about your success. You're number 8 mortgage lender overall in the whole state of Colorado of about 8,000 licensees. Is that right?
Right.
8,000 licensees?
I think that's right.
Okay, and that's in production volume. In order to accomplish this, there must be something that you're doing to allow clients to trust you. What is that secret sauce?
Well, and that's very similar to what we were just talking
Okay.
about. It's a whole new strategy. It's more time spent. It's more care shown. And it's more idea. You know, a lot of people come to a real estate agent and a mortgage professional and they say, I have a housing plan. It has to do with school. It has to do with the location or hiking and biking trails. Help me out. And so now it just requires more of, hey, I have these fresh new ideas and strategy that you probably haven't thought about before, to then make this make sense for you. Because if I just answer your questions, here's the monthly payment, here's the interest rate. What do they call that? Being an order taker?
Yes.
It doesn't go anywhere. The conversion rate drops down. Nobody's motivated. But fresh new ideas, visuals and strategies, a whole new budget, that translate to a higher conversion rate to make this make sense for the family to buy their move-up property.
No, that's really awesome. And you know, the conversation that I just had with Amanda goes right into that. Like really educating buyers, you know, and providing a plan for them is really important. That's not the service you're going to get on an online, hi, check your rate here, right? Or what could I afford type of thing. So really, thank you for providing that kind of service. It's going to get people to where they want to be in housing. So that's awesome. Thank you. You shared with me that the mortgage environment has changed a lot in the past 4 years. This includes mergers, acquisitions in the mortgage industry. Please help us understand what this means.
So when mortgage rates were 3%, it seemed like the amount of mortgage companies doubled. You know, companies came out from everywhere and everybody had a real quick and easy way to get a mortgage at a low rate, and it made sense. And, you know, there the market went. When rates doubled, there was a lot of mergers and acquisitions. There was a lot of consolidation, mortgage companies that were unprofitable all of a sudden, so on and so forth. It changed the whole landscape. What I really like to talk about is in 2022 into 2023, with mortgage rates being high, mortgage loan officers, mortgage professionals like myself thought, you know, I don't need to be part of a bigger company. I'll just hang a shingle and be a mortgage broker. And that will benefit me and my customer because I can squash the rate. I can beat the competition by an eighth or a quarter. Buyers would eat that up real quick because they would think, okay, yeah, you have a cheaper rate. Great, let's work with you and we'll use your wholesale provider. That's where the money comes from. And this mortgage broker saved me a little bit on my rate. Let's go. And a lot of mortgage brokers brokerages were born in that period of time. Well, now the playing field's starting to even. Mortgage rates are starting to settle in. The Fed is not dumping debt into the market and pushing rates higher. Less volatility. The president actually just announced this morning that he's going to somehow, some way, put $200 billion of fresh capital behind Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And so that's even the playing field. Okay, so this consolidation's happened. I think you'll see again, just like in 2022, when mortgage pros went from big companies into little brokerages so that they could save an eighth the rate, you'll see a lot of the mortgage professionals go back into the big companies again.
Sure.
Because technology is expensive and efficiencies all of a sudden are expensive again, and the playing field's even. Those big mortgage companies also have more product to offer, bridge loan solutions, non-qualified mortgages, which I like to talk about too. And so you're not going to find that with a little mortgage brokerage shop and a wholesale provider.
Sure.
Typically, you're going to find a better set of products with a bigger company. So the company the pendulum went to mortgage brokerage, and now it's coming back into, bigger companies that are better capitalized and better suited to provide the technology that the market needs.
Sure. And probably a diverse, book of products.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
Let me speak about the non-QM mortgages. In 2013, the way to clean up the epic crash of 2010, 2011, mortgage was at fault for the economic meltdown. The Congressional Act Dodd-Frank came and cleaned up mortgage, and they defined what a mortgage should be. Their definition is now a qualified mortgage. Simply put, what a qualified mortgage is that an applicant separately meets criteria in income, separately assets, and separately credit score. There's this piece about collateral in the house itself, but it's usually income, assets, and credit. And if somebody has enough in assets to buy a home in cash, we can't ignore their, self-employed, wrote off all of their income kind of issue. We can't ignore that under the qualified mortgage definition. Well, there has been very little foreclosure, very little fallout, even through this last 3 years, of high rates, et cetera, which has been really good news for housing. Well, the creation of what's called a non-qualified mortgage goes against the Dodd-Frank Act definition. And what that means is that somebody applying today could have real strong assets and real strong credit, and maybe now we could ignore one of those elements, like the self-employed borrower who writes down their income. Non-qualified mortgages now account for about 25% of the market.
Okay.
Which is a huge number. Okay. And really, this is make sense underwriting. I know that somebody with a lot of assets could draw from those assets to make their mortgage payment. If they're writing down their income and sort of hiding it from a tax perspective, the lender says, well, where's your income? We know that they could draw from the assets. So this isn't like exotic, crazy high risk mortgage lending like happened in 2010. This is pretty responsible. It's just that it's outside of the Congressional Act Dodd-Frank, now called non-qualified mortgage. I think realtors need to be tuned into that, because if you're sitting in a class, especially one that I would teach, I would tell you about the use, need, and niche for non-qualified mortgage programs.
Okay. Interesting.
It is.
Really interesting to know. Okay. So speaking of underwriters, they seem to have a hot button. What's the hot button today for an underwriter?
Warm cookies and I think it's loan to value.
Okay.
So if you're putting enough money down and you 2 years later decide to walk away from that property and we have a foreclosure to contend with, if we have equity to cut the price and repaint the house, fix it up and sell it, it's a pretty safe investment. I think the hot button for an underwriter is just, are you putting enough money down to keep the loan to value palatable?
Okay. Okay. Good to know. All right. You and I know that when the Fed drops the rate, it doesn't affect the mortgage rate. So you want to expand on that a little bit?
I do. I think most of the real estate community now knows that there's a disconnect between the federal funds rate as an index and what the 30-year mortgage rate is. Still, most consumers don't know that. So every time the Fed cuts the rate, our phones go crazy. However, this year, I do see some things happening where the Fed could be making decisions, and I'd like Coldwell Banker real estate community to be aware of this. The Fed could be making decisions going forward that will have more of an impact on the 30-year mortgage rate. What those are, matter of fact, one of the announcements just happened this morning. Didn't come from the Fed, it came from the president. The president said, we're going to somehow, some way come up with $200 billion of liquidity and put it in the mortgage market so that you can remain more fluid and margins can compress and the playing field evens and rates come down a little bit. Let's help the market. So he announced that. I think the Fed could potentially do the same thing. What's interesting is in May of this year, 2026, we will see leadership of the Fed turn over. Jerome Powell's out, the new leader's in. Now, there's a board of governors that have to be convinced if a new idea comes up. So it's an uphill battle. But what could happen is the leader of the Fed could say, hey, housing needs help. Affordability needs help. Let's pull some levers, like put more money into the mortgage market to create liquidity and bring rates down as a result. The Fed hasn't been doing that in 3 years. Matter of fact, they've been putting debt back into the market to be absorbed instead of buying that debt. So I think heads up is come May, new policy, new leadership. Could we have things rather than just a Fed funds cut? Could we have things like let's buy mortgage-backed securities? Let's put money back into the market to bring rates down and help affordability. I think that's the key.
Okay, great. What else? Anything else for us on the mortgage side?
You know, I think that the old habits need to change is the one last thing I would mention.
Okay.
Old habits being, hey, you know, here's a list of mortgage lenders. Good luck. They'll battle it out. You know, strategy, partnership, everyone weighing in and caring for the client together is really what makes the difference. Did the mortgage lender give you fresh ideas on your budget? Did he make this mortgage become more affordable with great ideas? How can I write my contract to accommodate all of the different moving pieces and new ideas that came up to make the house make sense for the customer?
Sure.
I think a lot of realtors like to hand off, you know, that responsibility, which I totally respect. But collaboration, I've seen, makes families happier, makes raving fans of the realtor and the lender, because then we can come together and create that budget and the plan and make it seem more affordable when maybe last week it wasn't. So I would encourage the community to collaborate with mortgage lenders.
Okay.
Your customers need it.
Great idea. And great perspective as well, because what we know is education is going to be really important. And, you know, the market, the pandemic market, no one had time to do their job. Like as real estate professionals, we didn't have time to really do our job because everything was moving so fast. I would assume on the mortgage side, you didn't have time to really do your job. And then we're now in this situation that Amanda talked about a little bit, was now, you know, the buyers who bought saw the seller with all that equity, and that's just not the case now.
Right.
And they may be in a loan product. If they bought even 2 years ago, that wasn't the best loan product because everything was moving so fast.
Yeah.
We didn't really have time to plan. So that's a really great perspective.
I would also say on top of that, it was easy for mortgage lenders.
Sure.
We could qualify anyone at 2.5% or 3%. And now it takes so much more strategy and so a new perspective to qualify at a 7 or a 6.5% rate.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably the mortgage lenders were also sloppy and not doing their job as well at that point too. We didn't have time.
Right, we didn't have
We had
time.
100 mortgage applicants every month. Yeah.
Right. Buyers had about a nanosecond to decide if they wanted to live in that house or not. So everybody else was on the rush as well. Thank you so much for being with us and all that great information. I do have, you know, a surprise question for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
You ready? Okay. So I know that you're a musician.
Yes.
Yes. How many instruments do you play?
I can play 4.
You can play 4. Name the 4.
The trumpet, the baritone horn, the guitar, and the bass guitar.
Okay. So what is your absolute favorite song that gets you jazzed? Like what would be your walk-up song?
Wow. I can give you a genre because it's hard for me to pick a song. I'm so into music.
Okay, I'll go with the genre.
Country rock, like a Blackberry Smoker, a Turnpike Troubadours. You know, it's a little country, a little rock.
Okay. I could go off on that, but I won't.
I might have just created a new genre, by the way. I don't know if that exists. Country rock. But
yeah, there we go. I think it does. But anyway, again, thank you so much, Matthew, for being with us today on the Mile High View. Appreciate everything that you do, and we'll see you soon. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Tammy.
Yes.
Happy New Year to you, too.
Thank you. All right, Coldwell Banker, up next, the one, the only, Dr. Elliot Eisenberg. Dr. Eisenberg is an internationally acclaimed economist and speaker known for his ability to make complex economic trends clear, engaging, and even a little bit fun. He earned his BA in economics from McGill University in Montreal and his master's and PhD in public administration from Syracuse University. Former senior economist at the National Association of Home Builders, he now leads one of my favorite, Graphs and Laughs LLC, where he shares daily economic insights read by tens of thousands. He's authored hundreds of articles, speaks across the globe, and is affectionately known as the Bowtie Economist. Elliot will share his perspective on what's next for inflation, interest rates, and one of our favorite hot topics, the housing outlook for 2026. He's got the insights we've been waiting for. Welcome to the show, Elliot.
Thank you for the warm introduction. It's great to be here, Tammy. Thank you.
Well, it's always great to have you. So, let's just dive right into interest rates.
Okay, next question. I don't see them moving a great deal. I think the Fed will cut rates on the Fed funds side, Fed funds rate by a quarter point or maybe a half a point. I think they should cut a half a point. Rates are still restrictive, so rates are slowing down economic growth, and the unemployment rate rising a bit. I think there's room for them to cut. But the question is, will that result in a reduction in long-term rates?
Sure.
And as other speakers have already discussed, Matt and others, the relationship between the Fed funds rate, which is short-term money, it's literally the rate that banks charge each other for overnight loans, overnight versus 10 years. That's 3,650 times differential, right? So in very long run terms, they go together, bet higher rates, but in the short term, they're not terribly correlated at all. So I would be very suspect if we saw rates meaningfully move down this year on the 10-year and then commensurately on the 30-year. But there's a caveat here. The caveat is the relationship between the 10-year and the 30-year itself.
Okay.
So there's a relationship between the Fed funds and the 10-year, but then there's the 10-year and the 30-year. And that gap has fallen of late. Last 6-7 months, if I'm not mistaken, it's fallen 30 or 40 basis points, so 0.3 percentage point. I was pleasantly surprised by that movement. Maybe we get a little pleasantly surprised and it falls a little more and returns closer to what it was pre-COVID when it was about 170 basis points. So it's still elevated. It's come down, but it's still elevated. Maybe we get a little more relief because of the stability that Matt has mentioned earlier.
Okay.
And Amanda also, for that matter.
Okay.
And Greg.
Okay. So is that what's driving it a little bit down, is the stability?
Yeah,
or are there other factors?
I think it's largely, at the long end, it's stability and it's inflation expectations. And they haven't moved much. They've been pretty stable. If you look at various indices of consumer sentiment for inflation numbers or CEO sentiment on inflation numbers, or comparing treasuries like a 5-year treasury and a tip-protected 5-year treasury, those numbers haven't moved all that much. We're in a situation now where we believe the Fed has got long-run inflation, if not under control, certainly in their scope, and are paying close attention, even though they're cutting short-term rates.
Okay, great. Let's shift to home prices. Home prices across the country, locally here in Colorado. What's your insight on home prices?
I've been marginally pleasantly surprised, I think, because we saw home prices month over month decline for about 7 or 8 months. And about 3 months ago, they began to go up month over month.
Okay.
Year over year are still declining, but month over month has increased. And if that's true, I think that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's good for sellers, not good for buyers. There's always the flip side of the coin with real estate, obviously. But I would have bet that prices would have gone down more than they have. Maybe the increases in prices a month over month that we've seen, there's some seasonality going on conceivably. I mean, the housing market's been so weirded out because of COVID and the pull and the yin and the yang of COVID. It's hard to tell, but maybe we don't see prices actually decline nationally. Whereas 6 months ago, I would have bet my right arm that they would have declined nationally. Now I'm not so sure. So we may have seen close to the bottom of the performance. They still may decline in real terms.
Sure.
So we're going to get 1.5%, let's make up a number, 1.5% net growth. But inflation's 2.5%. So they're going to fall by 1 in real terms. We may continue to see that. That wouldn't surprise me. But out and out declines nationally may not happen.
Okay. Are there certain areas of the country that are doing better than others?
Oh, big time.
Okay, do tell.
And here in Denver, we're now on the receiving end of the unpleasantness of that process. And the way I describe it really is COVID reversal.
Okay.
Where you are now depends critically on where you were 4 years ago. If you were hot then, you're cold now. If you were cold then, you're hot now. So the Northeast is really on fire. And these are New York and Hartford, Connecticut, and Boston, Massachusetts, Springfield, Mass, Worcester, Mass. These are towns that did not do well during COVID. And now they're phenomenally. Milwaukee is on fire. Wisconsin's doing spectacularly well, partly because they were colder than a doornail back then, and because objectively home prices in those areas, not so much Boston, New York, but certainly the upper Midwest, which is the other area of very high home price growth performance, because home prices there are generally pretty affordable.
Okay.
So you're getting a combination of they were cold and they're low priced, and now they're really doing very well for themselves.
Okay. Well, our daughter went to Marquette, and I don't know that I would want to live there in the winter, but.
Hey, you know, but put it this way, if all you can afford is to live
Sure.
in a 500 square foot house, or a condo when you want a house, or a townhouse when you prefer a single family house, you'll gladly take what's available and what's on offer.
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of talk about tariffs.
Yes.
Let's get Elliot's perspective on tariffs.
Okay, so I'm an economist. You're never going to hear an economist say tariffs are a good idea. They're not. There are rare exceptions when economists agree that they make sense. One of them is for purpose of national defense. So when President Trump says it's a national defense issue, you know, courts are very likely to give him large leeway being the chief executive, right? And it's important to think about that because you don't know what national defense consists of. So if 7 or 8 years ago someone said, look, the Chinese have taken over the toy market, who cares? Right, not national defense. But then you realize 7 years later, oh my gosh, what are drones? They're really like grown-up toys on steroids. And because we lost the drone market, we kind of lost the military drone market. So you never know what market becomes what. So military defense, critically important to have, you know, minerals, rare earths, whatever. Fine, great. And the other one is when a country is dumping. And dumping is when they sell something in your market below the price that it costs producers to make it in the country where they make the product. So it costs them $5 to make a cup, and they charge $4 here in America. Okay, you can retaliate. Whether you should or not is another question, but economists understand that's a reasonable approach.
Okay.
Beyond that, you really don't want to invoke tariffs unless there's some extraordinary purpose. And Congress has given the president authority to impose tariffs on a short-term basis if there's some emergency out there. 150 days they can raise tariffs 15% and so on. So generally you want to avoid tariffs. And but that said, we have tariffs. There's quite a number. But the impact of the tariffs has been much less than I thought. I really thought this was going to shake the foundations is a strong word, but we would really feel the reverberations quite profoundly. And we haven't. And there are a couple of reasons. The first reason is the tariffs haven't been as big and large. The tax rate, the tariff rate of 25%, which we thought was what it was on early April when they came out, has really come down to about 12 or 13 or 14%, which is high, but not nearly as high as 24 or 25. That's the first thing. And the second thing is economists like me sort of thought that the major impact of tariffs would be on inflation.
Okay.
And that's so we'd see a large jump in inflation. And instead what we've seen is a small jump in inflation and probably a small decline in employment. So weaker employment growth because of the tariffs and the uncertainty around the tariffs. So we've had, it's sort of the impacts have been felt more broadly, but less depth across the economy. And as a result, the distortions have been smaller. And the last thing about tariffs I want to conclude is while I'm not a fan of tariffs, we have to realize that they're not the death knell that people have made them. Even when I thought they were awful, they're not going to be that awful. And the way to think about it really is the example with weight. If I gained or if you gained 3 pounds or I gained 10, right? You know, you're a little smaller than I am, a little more petite. But if you gained 1 or 2 pounds, no one's going to notice. If I gained 5 pounds, no one's going to notice. Yeah, sure, some pants won't fit quite right. You got to take something on. But that's tariffs. They're mildly detrimental. But there's nothing colossally terrible about them that we're all going to go, oh my gosh, I'm laboring under tariffs. It's just awful. So look, I'd like them to go away. But we're going to live with them and it's going to be fine.
Okay. Good to know.
And the tariff and the inflationary effect of tariffs
Uh-huh.
will be over in 7 or 8 months.
Okay.
They'll go up and go down, and it goes away.
Okay. Good to know. So before we started the show, you were reading labor market report,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I was.
So what'd you learn this morning?
So labor market numbers, they've been chronically weak for a while. And I'm beginning to get the feeling that this is becoming the new normal.
Okay.
What we're seeing is massive investment in AI. And we're beginning to see very large labor productivity improvements. Data on labor productivity came in just a few days ago. Very high. Is it directly AI? I'm somewhat suspect. It's too quick. It's too early. So many firms haven't touched AI yet. But yet, partly AI, partly adjustment to tariffs, partly from COVID, partly this, that, high wages, this and that. Firms are really learning how to adapt and move and meander and change and shift well. If we have high labor productivity, we don't need such massive employment growth.
Sure.
A, and B, because of there's not the illegal immigrants coming into the country through the open border policy we had prior, we don't need to create so many jobs. So if we needed to create 150,000 jobs, say a year ago, maybe 50 or 60 is enough. We don't exactly know, but we see the unemployment rate beginning to last couple of months starting to smooth out. So maybe 50,000 jobs is enough. Again, it's too early to tell because we don't know the numbers on the deportations and so on. But I'm beginning to feel this might well be a new plateau that we reach. A much slower job growth than we had, but sufficient to keep the economy happy. And then labor productivity keeps GDP growing pretty well despite meager job growth. It's a strange mix or cocktail, but it's working. And this may be the new normal for a while.
Okay. So at what unemployment level would you be concerned?
It's not so much the level of unemployment, it's the rate of increase in the unemployment that
Okay.
I'm really focusing on.
Okay.
If we're seeing 1/10 of a point increase month after month after month, okay, that's when you start saying, whoa, we got a real problem on our hands. But we have had no evidence of that yet. We've seen a rise from 3.4 a trough about a year and a half ago, now 4.4, but that's over a very long period of time. So it's not enough to pull the ripcord, jump out of the airplane or whatever, evasive maneuvers. No,
Okay.
I'm watching, but I'm not nervous yet.
Okay. Okay. If you're not nervous, we're not nervous. All right. Sounds good. Let's talk a little bit about home builders.
Okay.
You know, for years they've been behind. They're not building enough inventory. Like, where are we today, or where are we going in 2026
With new homes?
With new homes.
Oh, probably nowhere.
Okay.
Flat to down, I would say. And here's the story. On the single family side, there's reasonable demand out there. And I think single family construction activity in 2026 is pretty much a carbon copy of 2025. So call it 900,000 units per year for the year. On the multifam side, however, as Greg mentioned in some detail, there's really just rents are doing poorly and vacancy rates are up. And this is not a happy place here in Denver, and nationally it's not a happy place either. Again, in those northeastern places like Boston and New York, things are strong and vacancies are low and rents are going up nicely, or parts upper Midwest. But in general, it's not. So I would expect multifamily starts, permits to start coming down.
Okay.
It starts to similarly come down. Remember, back in 21, it was magical for multifamily. Rents were going nuts. Interest rates were close to zero. It couldn't be any better. So there was just tons of construction that took place in multifam, and then suddenly conditions change and we're overbuilt and rates are high and FICO scores are now falling, and then there has to be recalibration, and that's what we're seeing in the pullback or expected pullback in multifam in 2026.
Okay. And single family?
Single family is going to be flat, I think.
Okay.
I really do. And I would like it to be better because the major problem our economy faces is a shortfall of housing. But there's too much competition among existing inventory that's rising that new builders have to contend with. And there's also too much new inventory that builders can't get rid of, homes that they've built that they can't get rid of. So in the short run, even though we have a housing shortage in the long run, in the short run, we're overbuilt in the new construction sector. Kind of strange.
It makes a whole lot of sense.
But it is what it is. The data is what it is, and I'm trying to understand it. But it's.
That's right. So how big of a concern is inflation?
I think inflation's much less of a concern than some people think. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
There's a divergence of opinion here, obviously. You line up 5 economists, the joke, you get probably 5 opinions, right?
Uh-huh.
So there's dissension. I wouldn't say dissension, but at the Fed, you read the minutes. They give you a summary after 3 weeks, and then a couple weeks later, you get the full minutes. And you hear the internal debate within the members of the Fed, be it the governors, 7 governors, or the 12 Fed bank presidents, 5 of whom vote on any given interest rate policy change decision making. And there's contention of, should we be lowering rates more, or are we concerned about inflation? And if we cut rates too much, inflation will start to go up again. I don't see inflation as being a fundamentally serious problem out there. The tariff issues, as I mentioned, I think the peak inflationary impacts are probably coming right around now, and they will slowly dissipate over time. Even if Supreme Court says President Trump can't do it, and they make other tariffs and so on, they're not going to raise them higher than they are now. So it's going to go away. Wage growth is hardly knocking the ball out of the park on that. Wage growth is slowing, and job growth is not particularly strong, and energy prices are low. So home prices are declining a little bit, and rental prices are declining more. So where's the energy that's going to generate the inflation that's out there? I go through the laundry list. I don't see it. So I think the Fed will be able to cut rates, and they won't have an inflationary problem in 26. Hopefully, I'm not found out to be a fool next year when you go, Elliot, you were totally wrong. If you bring me back,
Of course, bring you back every year.
I'm on the record. Inflation's not a problem.
Okay, inflation is not a problem. What is the problem?
The labor market makes me nervous.
Okay.
That's one of the other stuff too, but let's start there. Weakening labor market's not a great thing.
Sure.
You want to see people have jobs. You want to see people go out there and get employment and do things and buy things and stuff. So this weaker labor market, it's just strange. It's deteriorating, but very slowly. But what if job creation falls just a little bit? Then unemployment could go well up. We have a situation now where there's almost no one getting fired, and simultaneously no one getting hired. This is the labor market's kind of like in a freeze. It's very strange. I don't want it to deteriorate. That's really, or if it does, I want it to very slowly so that we can have other factors. But that's not a great thing. The other thing that troubles me is U.S. savings rates. They're very low. We don't save money as a society. And there are a number of reasons. Over like long secular periods of time, you can reduce savings because of new borrowing technology. Like a HELOC. When that was invented, suddenly you could borrow more because you couldn't borrow against your house until that was invented. Or the 30-year mortgage, for example, way back, that's 80, 90 years ago by now, but suddenly you could borrow money. So as we develop new methods of borrowing and we can get credit ratings more careful, you can do that. But the level we're at now, about 4%, is really pretty low. And oddly enough, that goes to part of why we have a trade deficit. Because both households are doing a very poor job of savings, a little bit, but poor job. They save a little. But the government, federal government, does a very poor job, and they run very large budget deficits. And this lack of savings is what generates trade deficits. So I'd like to see the budget deficit in Washington come down, and that would reduce our trade deficit in an organic fashion.
Okay. So we're not saving money.
We're not.
What are consumers spending their money on?
It depends, again, where you are in the income bracket.
Okay.
If you're at the lower end, you tend to buy lots of goods. You buy chairs, tables, television sets. You don't have a lot of money. You got to buy the basics, and you buy clothes. Those are all tariffed goods. Many of them are tariffed, not all. As you go up the income stream, up the income bracket, you buy services. So I joke that the higher income people, they're going to go on a cruise. And on this cruise, they're going to meet some rock stars and Nobel Prize winning economists if all goes well, maybe one day. But it's services. They go on vacation. They're getting a massage, that sort of stuff. Often untariffed. So we all pay tariffs. And the rich are buying goods, obviously, too. But they're buying a lot more services, which are untariffed. So I'm watching what the composition is. I'm watching also where people spend their money. Are we seeing the rich spend less or something? That would make me nervous. Are we seeing middle income class people move down to cheaper stores, like Walmart, for example, or Dollar Store or Dollar Tree or whatever those stores are? You're looking to see, trying to find out where the movement is among households of different income brackets to see whether people are doing better or worse and where they're economizing. And that gives us some insight into consumer sentiment and behavior.
Okay. Great to know.
It's a fascinating puzzle.
It is fascinating. Yes, and it is a puzzle.
It is a puzzle.
For sure. Okay.
And the data now is more, it's like lots of recent data reports from the government give both sides plenty of ammunition. The cut sider and the not cut rate side. They both can find them. It's like the data's going left and right simultaneously, and it's hard to figure out what the real trend is here.
Or whiplash.
And we also had the closure, and that caused data to not come out and be delayed, and the collection quality wasn't so good when they weren't collecting data. So there's a bit of a mishmash here.
Okay. So crystal ball.
Crystal ball.
What can we expect in 2026?
On the housing market side, I'd say pretty much more of 25. If your market's strong, you're probably going to stay strong for a while. If your market's weak, you're probably in the weaker market. I live in Miami. Miami's it's one of the weakest in the entire country. We were on fire back in 21 and 22. So there's payback here because people can't afford to buy a house. It gets too expensive. You're going to move somewhere else. Right. So on the interest rate side, probably not much happening. On the unemployment rate, I'm a little fearful that we get a little bit of a rise. And GDP, it will be above 2.25%, I think. So we could end up with a pretty good GDP number. Okay. So all in all, I'm pretty happy, knock on proverbial wood.
Happy, cautiously optimistic?
I would say cautiously optimistic, but with the possibility of, AI going bad somewhere,
sure.
Income's not picking up, the revenues for those firms not doing as well as we think, and some bad stuff. But that's,
Okay.
It's in a corner.
Any other highlights for Coldwell Banker agents?
I would continue to expand your skill set.
Okay.
And I think in this case, AI is the obvious place to go. If you're not using AI, you're doing yourself an immense disservice. And other agents that are using AI are going to eat your lunch because they're going to be more productive. They're going to be able to put out more video and more stuff and more social media and make more phone calls and figure out how you can seize this technology to improve yourself. A year ago or 2 years ago, I might have said, learn a new language or something. But now it's clearly AI, okay. AI. And the job is AI is going to help you if you can harness it well. And if it can't, you're going to really struggle.
Okay, great. Well, that is such great information and a lot of information and a lot to digest for sure. So now, my famous mystery question.
Okay.
Hey.
I'm nervous.
So if you were a topping on a pizza, what topping would you be and why?
What topping would I be and what I'd be probably onions, something strong and sharp. It adds a lot of flavor to it. And I'm not going to I like mushrooms, but they're kind of mushy. I'm out with those. I'm largely a vegetarian, so I'm not going to have meat. I don't like pineapple much, so the Hawaiian pizza is not going to work. But some, onions, raw onions, ideally. So they're crunchy and you feel them and they're tangy. Oh yeah.
Great answer. Crazy question, great answer, right?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with us on the
pleasure.
Mile High View. It's always fun, entertaining, and so informative. Thanks for always being a part of it. And thank you, Coldwell Banker agents, for joining us for the Mile High View. Happy New Year. Here is to a very successful 2026. Please reach out to me if there's ever anything I can do for you, and we will see you soon.